Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. For this week's cake, I wanted to do another Halloween themed cake. This will be a 3D carved pumpkin cake. This will not be your average happy orange jack-o'-lantern. We're going to call this one Gone Bad. He's a little bit miserable because he's been carved too early before Halloween and he's starting to lose his color and droop a little bit. So here we go. So the first thing you want to do, of course, is fill and stack your layers. I decided to use 3 8-inch rounds here and then carve it down versus using 2 round cakes, putting them together. I just wanted to show you guys a little trick in case you didn't have those rounded off pans. So another thing about this specific cake is this one is a very moist cake. It is a red velvet cake, and since we're carving it to take off some of that hardened up caramelization parts, it's going to be a little bit tricky. So I'm going to show you guys how to get away with that. So the first thing you want to do is start off by carving the bottom edges inwards. Make sure you're using a very sharp serrated knife for this and just kind of literally angle it and carve inwards. You don't want to carve too in because you don't want the top layer of the cake to kind of make this fall. So just angle it just a little bit just so you have that nice curve. Do the same thing to the top of your cake. And of course, this is a pumpkin, so pumpkins can look any different way. Some are taller, shorter, fatter, wider. So do whatever you want to get your basic shape. Don't forget to kind of use your serrated knife for the top as well, because pumpkins are not flat on top. They have that little indent right before the stem comes out. And then go ahead and add your little lines right here. And literally I just took my knife, held it at a right angle and at a left angle until I got my little tiny indented areas. And you do want to have this part done because when we add the buttercream later, it needs to have somewhere to go. So that way you have your nice inverted lines and it's not completely flat. So we're also going to be doing kind of a twist on a buttercream technique for this, which I will get to here in a bit. So just get your pumpkin carved to the shape that you want it. And then I recommend placing it into the freezer for a good 20 minutes before adding your buttercream. So clean up your crumbs from your cake board as well. So as far as the crumb coat, normally I would put the crumb coat on and then kind of carve a little bit, but I wanted to do it opposite this time. And I wanted to say, when you're doing a very moist cake, especially a 3D carved cake, your cake tends to tear and rip a little bit easier. So instead of taking your normal buttercream, I took mine and melted it down into the microwave for about 5 to 7 seconds and then did my crumb coat. So this just makes your buttercream smooth and lighter, so that way you're not ripping it as you're going. So you do want to make sure that you're getting all the way into those grooves. This is just a very rough crumb coat. It doesn't have to be perfectly smooth because we're going to be doing a different smoothing technique with this cake anyway. So just make sure that basically you're getting all these crumbs packed down and that you're taking your time in between those little lined areas and just kind of adding your buttercream to the lines. Once you have your crumb coat complete, go ahead and set your cake into the fridge to set up until it is nice and firm. Your buttercream will melt in that microwave, but it will set back up completely, I promise. So go ahead and get this done, place it in the fridge, and then we will continue the decorating process. Now for this decoration technique, the number one thing that we're focusing on, even though we're not really focusing on getting it super smooth at this point, is we want to make sure that we have a thick layer of icing going all the way around the cake. So I used a red velvet cake here and a white icing only because I'm going to be airbrushing my cake. So there are a couple crumbs that you'll be able to see and they'll show through. But because of the way that we're going to be decorating, I wasn't super concerned. Otherwise, I would have went ahead and added another coat of buttercream after I was done with this part. But this was completely fine. You're mainly focusing on just getting it to the same thickness all the way around and putting a little bit extra where those grooved parts were, so that way we're going to press them in later so it looks like a real pumpkin. So don't forget to pull off some of that excess from the top too, because we do want to make sure that it still indents at the top. And then I'm going to show you guys a cool trick as well. So you can buy acetate paper on Amazon, you can use cardstock. What I decided to use to very first start smoothing my cake was literally a card from the store. what I did was, you don't want to set your cake up in the fridge, by the way. You want to leave it freshly coated. And then literally, a player's card for a deck of cards is completely fine. It curves just enough. It's the same thickness. Just make sure, of course, it's clean. And I literally hold it in my hands, curve it a little bit just to kind of match up the same shape. And I went from the bottom and pulled all the way up until I was happy. Now here's the fun part of this cake. We're not going to be using smoothers and all that fun stuff. We're going to be using our hands. So make sure you put a glove on, get a little bit of water to the side. You're going to dip your fingers and your hands in the water and slowly start to rub all the way around on this cake until you get it nice and smooth. Now, there are some imperfections on pumpkin, so if you're getting frustrated and you can't get it as smooth as you'd like, don't worry about it. You can also pop it back into the fridge a little bit longer. And then for the indented areas, just don't forget to remember where they were at. Press your finger up and down. And then when you do this, you'll have a little bit of buttercream that sticks out from the side. Just take your hand and smooth that off. And just work on it till you're happy. So once you're happy with that, go ahead and place your cake back into the freezer, and then we're going to start outlining where we want our eyes and the mouth of the pumpkin to be. So I had mine in the freezer for probably a good 15 minutes, and just enough time for that buttercream to set up because I didn't want to smear anything while I was carving out the eyes and the mouth. So I just took a little Dresden tool. You can use a toothpick as well if you don't have one of these. That's probably going to be fine as well. And just kind of make an outline on what you want your eyes and your mouth to look like. It's okay if you can see some of that cake through because we're going to be painting this anyway. So don't worry about it. I know it's going to look a little bit funny here, but I promise it'll come together. So once you're happy with how your mouth and your eyes look, we're going to be doing kind of a crazy technique here. And I know you're looking at it right now like, oh my gosh, what is she doing? This is not going to work. But it does, and it's going to look fantastic. So take some of your extra buttercream, put it in a round piping bag, and go ahead and just start squeezing lumps and bumps and long lines and whatever you want all over the place. The more texture, the better this cake is going to look and the more realistic. I know right now it has little Hershey's Kisses, but I'm going to show you how to fix that here in a second. Get your lumps and bumps wherever you want them to be. Place this in the freezer to set up for about 20 minutes, and then we're going to start the smoothing process. So here's what we're going to do. Put that glove back on, and you're literally going to use the warmth of your finger and smooth in circular motions all around every lump, every bump, and the sides. So now you can literally pretend, oh, you're playing with Play-Doh and you're smoothing out, you know, your pumpkin, and where it has the little ridges where the buttercream meets the buttercream, you can literally take it and pull it down until you are completely happy with it. See what I'm doing right here? I'm literally just pulling the buttercream into the other buttercream and smoothing it off so it looks like we didn't just add some buttercream on top of this pumpkin, but this is growing out of the pumpkin. So just continue this on every little lump that you've created until you're completely happy with the look. Now, it's about to come together here in a second as soon as we start painting, and then you're going to be amazed. So what I did was I airbrushed my pumpkin. If you don't have an airbrush machine, you can also dry brush this as well. So take a clean paintbrush, a fluffy paintbrush, and you are going to let your cake set up in the freezer, but you want to make sure there's no condensation, otherwise you'll get lines on this. So let your buttercream set up and there's no condensation on it so you don't mess up your painting. And then you can get some luster dust, which is more matte, or if you want a shinier pumpkin, you can use pearl dust as well and just kind of brush on your colors. You can also use black cocoa powder, regular cocoa powder, whatever you want to get the colors that you are wanting. So now that all my lumps and bumps are completely smooth, I'm going to start making the stem. Now for the stem, I did use a piece of fondant. I literally just rolled one side thinner than the other, took a little tool, you can use a toothpick as well if you don't have this tool, and create some texture on here, some lines, go all the way around. And then we're going to do not your normal pumpkin stem, but we're going to make ours twist just so it matches the personality that this pumpkin is going to have. So I literally created my little lines and then began twisting the stem and turned it over. I wanted him to be very unique looking. So once I was done with this and I decided how long I wanted my stem to be, I took a X-Acto knife, cut off a little bit of that edge right here just so it was to the right size that I was wanting. And then I placed a piece of toothpick inside of here and placed him on top of my pumpkin. If you don't have a toothpick or you don't want to use a toothpick, you can use a piece of spaghetti as well. So place your stem, and then now it's time for the fun part. So when you're painting on a cake, it's always better to use a lighter color first versus a darker color because you can kind of see through certain colors as well. So we're going to be doing this one in layers, and I promise it's really going to come together right now. This is where you're going to be amazed. So in my video, this looks orange, but this color is actually called flesh tone. But I had a light behind me and it was shining straight on the pumpkin. So for whatever reason, it just made it look a little bit orange. I do go ahead and add orange later on, but this one is actually called flesh tone. So the airbrush machine I'm using is called Master Airbrush. I really love it. It works great. I've had it for about a year now, and it's just fun to play with. So the first thing I did was in all those little ridges, I went around the outside of the ridges with my flesh tone and just very lightly holding your airbrush a little bit further back, painted on this color. And then, as soon as I'm happy with this, see how I left some of that normal buttercream color as well? It's because I wanted this to be just a different looking pumpkin. So I wanted to leave a little bit of that kind of white buttercream showing through, just a peek. So once you're done with your flesh tone, then you can add a couple drops of brown into your airbrush and begin spraying that, overlapping the flesh tone color that we just sprayed. So take it and kind of go a little bit more inwards, a little bit more towards the ridges so that you can still see the flesh tone, but you're also getting that more in-depth look. So what I also did was spray the little lumps and bumps that I've created as well, mostly on the bottom side, so that way it looks more three-dimensional and like they're poking out. So also on one of the eyes and the mouth, I did also outline that in brown as well. And see the texture that you got with smoothing with your hands there? It kind of almost looks like real pumpkin skin. You have little tiny lines where you were smoothing, and it just really brings this pumpkin to life. So once I was happy and I got my more in-depth look, I did add some black into my airbrush. And again, I took that in the very center where the ridges are completely indented, and I added that black into there. And don't forget about the top as well. So you want to make sure that you kind of streak your stem, your twisted stem, just to bring that to life. Don't forget about your stem. We don't want to leave it white. And then start from the inside of the stem, darken that up a bit because that's where it goes inward, and bring that out into those ridges. So once you have brought it out into the ridges, we're going to bring it all the way to life here by adding a little bit more coloring. So now is the time where I'm going to be adding a little bit more of that orange. I'm going to darken up some of those places a little bit more, and then I'm going to paint the eyes. So with this part, you don't want it spraying on the outside of where you put the eyes, so you're going to hold it pretty close, pull back that lever just a tiny bit, and make sure you're aiming it correctly so that way you're not spraying the whole outside of the eyeballs. Same thing for the mouth. So just continue to paint the black in there. If you're using a paintbrush, same thing, just be very careful, paint your bin. And then now we're gonna really bring this all the way to life and start adding a little bit more shading to him, a little bit more in depth for where we want him to look more three-dimensional. So again, now I'm just, okay, like I need to add a little bit more brown here, a little bit more orange. If you wanted to use green, you could use green, whatever you want really, just to bring your pumpkin to life until you're happy with the way that he looks. So I was pretty satisfied at this point. I was just literally adding a little bit more shading. I didn't want to forget about the bottom because we don't want it to be just light in color. We want to make him pop. And because it's curving in and your pumpkin's supposed to be kind of coming out of the ground, we're going to add some black shading at the bottom parts of this pumpkin as well. And then just kind of finish him off until you're completely satisfied. And then you will be done. I really hope you guys liked this video. If you have any questions, comment below. Please subscribe and hit that notification bell. I'd really appreciate it. And if you guys would like to watch another Halloween video, I will be back next week. Thank you.